my name is David Ansara of the Free Market Foundation. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Martin van Staden, who's head of policy here. And this video today is the third in a series on privatization, and it is related to the Privatization in Practice project that the Free Market Foundation has been running for the last couple of months with the very generous support of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. So thank you very much to Kaz for supporting this project. Now, Martin, we've had previous discussions with Christoph Klein, who's the lead researcher on the project, as well as Zakele Mthembu, who's a legal researcher at the FMF, talking about privatization. But let's take a bit of a step back. What does privatization mean to us here at the Free Market Foundation?
Yeah, thanks, David. So I mean, it's a dirty word. People like throwing it around, acting like it's something to avoid and so on. And usually what they have in mind is that a state asset, or what people think is something that belongs to everyone, the public, gets taken out of the public's domain and given to some profit-seeking private actor to enrich themselves. That's kind of the idea of privatization. But we take a slightly broader view, and that is that the private sector is not just profit-seeking business, it's everyone. It's the person selling mangoes at the street corner, it's civil society organizations, it's communities, it's township communities, it's suburban communities. And to us, privatization means that those people, the private sector, ordinary South Africans, their families, their communities, their businesses, take responsibility for things that ordinarily, for good or ill, people think the government should be providing. And as we've experienced in South Africa, in many cases, I think in most cases, the government is not providing properly. So that could include taking state assets and selling them, but it's not limited to that. It also includes taking state functions. For instance, the provision of electricity. So privatization wouldn't just mean selling Eskom to a private bidder to us. It also means allowing the community of Frankfurt in the Free State to generate their own electricity, because that is a function that the state provides that's now been given to the local community. So privatization is a broad concept to us that means ordinary people, citizens, are taking back a responsibility that they delegated to the state. And in South Africa's context, it's simply out of necessity, really, that this now has to happen.
Yeah, and a lot of state ownership is premised on this idea of universal access, that the state needs to provide a role that allegedly the market could not provide because there's not enough incentive. Could you maybe explore some of the counter arguments to that point?
Yeah, so I mean, people say that somehow the market, there's market failure and so on. But in South Africa specifically, and I think you see this around the world to various extents, but I mean, as a society grows richer and so on, the kind of negative aspects to a state that fails is far less kind of intense. But in South Africa, it's very intense. So we see state failure. We see it every single day of our lives, where Eskom has one single job that it can kind of develop an expertise for and master, which it simply has not. It cannot and it has not. So the discussion about market failure in South Africa's context is entirely theoretical and academic discussion. That is all about, well, maybe the market may not provide for everyone. The fact is the state is not providing for everyone, and in many cases is not providing for anyone. Crime, for instance, is a great example. Rich or poor, South Africans are all exposed to a kind of a unique, in the global stage, wave of crime. So the state simply isn't providing that to anyone. And that is where the private sector comes in, private security. That's something, again, like an example of something that has been privatized without us selling the police service, for instance. The private security sector has come in and actually provided real safety and security. unfortunately only for those who can afford it. But then for those who cannot, you have neighborhood watches, you have community action groups that have also kind of privatized that function. So yeah, the discussion about universal service, I mean, it's a nice idea, and in many cases the private sector is the way to get there. In theory, the state does that because it uses taxes and it kind of provides this equally, but that's just not how it plays out in practice. Christoph Klein used the example of cell phones, for instance. Everyone in South Africa, rich, poor, have cell phones. That the government did not provide that, so there is universal access to the internet now. But the things that we really do struggle with, that poor South Africans do struggle with, these are things that are more often than not provided by the government or supposed to be provided, and are not.
Yeah, another example is in healthcare. There's a big debate around national health insurance at the moment. The promoters of NHI say that we need to do this in order to provide universal healthcare in South Africa. But what they fail to recognize is that we already have universal access to healthcare. You can go into any government hospital today and receive care and treatment, but it won't be very good treatment. You'll wait in a very long queue and not get the kind of care that you need. So I think we need to kind of push back against those kinds of arguments. All right, but you mentioned the role or the concerns that people might have around the poor being left out. Could we explore that a bit more? You know, I think maybe some of those ideas are often a bit misplaced.
Certainly misplaced, but kind of understandable. I think people are concerned about privatization because it's something kind of new. People are used to getting this very sloppy service from the state. It's bad, but it's there. And of course, our opponents, socialists and statists, would say that when you privatize, the service will just disappear for you. So just be happy with the bad service you're getting, because if it's privatized, you won't get it at all. So I think a lot of people have been led astray to believe that. It's not true, but we have to acknowledge, and I think we as free marketeers who have a good understanding of economics understand that nothing is costless. It doesn't matter how good the policy is. Many of the policies that we support are not costless. There will be risks associated with them. There will be costs associated with it. But what we've come to understand, and I think increasingly more and more South Africans are coming to understand this now, especially as the state's capacity collapses, is that to not privatize, to not do it, is going to be more costly. It's going to be more risky than to do it. So you think about, let's say, the Western Cape Department of Healthcare. That does okay, from what I've heard. And we won't go out of our way to say, oh no, but you have to kind of privatize that right now. We do have the capacity for nuance, and there's no need then, maybe in that situation, to do that immediately. Maybe a far more gradual process of privatizing something like healthcare in the Western Cape. But then you have the example, let's take a random example, the Tsabola in the northwest province. It is a municipality in name only. There is nothing there. I was surprised to learn that even revenue collection by that municipality has just stopped. They have stopped taxing people for local rates and taxes. So then you know, when the state is not even able to collect taxes anymore, there is nothing there. So their waterworks is falling apart. The infrastructure is simply not being maintained, much less being built. And in a situation like that, for an opponent of privatization to come and say, oh no, but the poor will be left behind if we privatize, is perverse. It is absolutely ridiculous, because there is no service. Service is not being provided, and there is an active citizen community and business community in the Tsabola that is standing ready to provide. They're saying, listen, just let us do it. Just let us provide the water. Let us provide the electricity. Let us provide infrastructure. Let us maintain the roads. They are there. They are ready. But because in South African positive law and in our policy environment, that is illegal. You're not allowed to provide things that the state should provide. They can't do it. People want to be law-abiding citizens. They're ready to provide the service. They can't because the government is, in theory, saying that they have to provide. So, yes, the idea that some people might be left behind, there might be merit to that. The point is, in South Africa's reality right now, millions are being left behind by the state when it is supposed to be providing these services. So for us not to privatize, for us not to empower communities, businesses, families, individuals, to just do it, just do what you need to do to protect your vital interests. That is a far, far more costly gamble, I would say, than to go into the kind of unknown of privatization. I think it's simply guaranteed that privatization will be a better deal for most South Africans than what we currently are doing at our current trajectory.
So critics of privatization might say, well, it's too risky to embark on this path. But there is a risk of inaction, of doing nothing. And we're seeing the consequences of that now. So I would say you have to choose what risk you're willing to take.
Yeah.
And as Thomas Sowell once said, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. We have to recognize what those trade-offs are and act accordingly.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks very much, Martin, and thanks to you, our audience, for joining us for this conversation. We are hoping to release our paper early next year, and do look out for that. We'll put a link to that down in the description once that's out, and we'll hopefully have a launch webinar for that as well. But that's it from the Free Market Foundation team. Until next time, stay free.